All right, so make sure you guys have the files for today. Files are DJM15/5 for module 5. HTML5 continued because we started it 2 modules ago and we're just continuing it now. What I'm going to do is just kind of open this up. I'm going to go to File, Add Folder to Workspace. I'm going to find the folder and I'm just going to add it. Okay, that's going to give me all of the files. I'm going to hit exercise 1 here. And what we're going to be doing is talking about something called an HTML attribute. And before I even really talk about that, I want to give kind of a scenario here. Okay, let's pretend that I have this magical machine. Okay, and in this machine, it's like this invention where if you type out what you want or you give it information about what you want, it'll build the object. Okay, so I can build any object in the world as long as I describe it. So for instance, let's say I wanted to build an orange, like a literal orange, and I wanted to build a car. Okay, so this is the object, and then what I want to do is describe the object using something called a property or an attribute. So for instance, what are the attributes of an orange? Well, oranges have a color, and that color is orange, right? Oranges also have texture, right? So there's a texture of an orange. We might say it's like bumpy. Maybe it has a smell. I don't really know how you describe it. Citrusy. It's not really a word, but you know, describes how an orange would smell. Maybe the size, you know, the diameter. Maybe it's, I don't know, a diameter of 5 inches. Well, that seems kind of big. 1.5 inches. Okay. Now let's talk about a car. So a car also has a color, right? And let's just say for the sake of argument, this car is orange. Kind of ugly, but hey, let's go with it. Maybe it's got a model, right? Or manufacturer. Let's say it's a Ford, and let's say it's got, you know, 2 doors or 4, you know, number of doors. Let's say 4, okay? And it's got a top speed of 200 miles per hour, okay? And we could keep listing properties or attributes for these 2 items, and each of these attributes would have a value of some sort, okay? And the point of this is that every attribute has its own value that's specific to that, you know, property. You know, when I'm talking about the smell of something, citrusy makes a lot of sense. When I'm talking about the texture of something or the size of something, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, the properties are specific to the object. Once again, smell makes a lot of sense when you're describing an orange. Doesn't really make as much sense when you're describing a car. Number of doors makes sense when you're talking about a car. Doesn't make a lot of sense when you're talking about an orange, right? So all of these properties of these objects are kind of specific to the object, but at the same time, some of them overlap. So you can have color for both of them, and they can even have the same value, even though an orange and a car are very different in terms of what they are. So what does that have anything to do with what I'm talking about here? So I'm just going to preview this page, and this is our page here. So this is what, you know, I took the HTML, I loaded it in here, and if you look at the page, it's a very basic page. There's a head section, and there's a body section, there's a headline, and there's a paragraph, and there's a unordered list that has nested list items in it, right? And the end result is it looks like this. Okay, that's the end result. Now, you might wonder, well, why is it that, like, you know, why is it when I have a heading, the heading is always on the left side? Or why is it that, you know, my text is always black? Why is it never another color? You know, why is it always a white background? And the answer is that your browser actually has something that states what the default visual look of everything is. That is what's called a user agent. Okay, so user agent is a document that the browser uses to determine the default look of a web page. So in other words, if you just have a pure HTML document with no visual information, the user agent of the browser is going to look at your code and it's going to go, oh, okay, this is an H2, and it's going to have a certain style for how H2s look. There's going to be a certain style for how H3s look, H4s, H5, H6, paragraphs, strong tags, any sort of tag that exists. Your browser sort of has a default way of stylizing. Okay, you can even see this. I'm going to take this page here, and I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go to Inspect, and I'm going to get something that kind of looks like this. And if you look at it under Elements, I'm going to select the H2 element right here. And if you look on the right under Styles, this is like, Styles is sort of the visual look. And this, see how it actually says User Agent here? So this is actually like the built-in default way that the H2 should look. That's built directly into the browser. Okay. So this is why my text is aligned to the left, and my text is black, and the page is white, and all this other sort of stuff, because it's built into the user agent. Okay. What if we didn't want to just use the default? What if I, for instance, wanted the attributes, the heading 2 here to be placed in the middle or the center of the page? Well, what we could do is use something called an HTML attribute. What an HTML attribute does, or what it is HTML attributes are additional information about an HTML tag that is given to the browser. Okay. So in other words, I'm going to go back to this H2 here. Now, nowhere in this H2 does it really, this says what it is, which is it's a heading, but it doesn't really state where the text should go, left, middle, or center. So if there's no information, the browser just does what the default is, and the default is to put the heading on the left side here. What I'm going to do is add additional information to this tag. The way that you can do that is if I go inside of this tag here, I can add what's called an attribute. Attributes go inside of the tag, and they're just some sort of name, kind of like, here we had names like number of doors or manufacturer or texture or something. It's the same idea, except, these are some things that are going to affect our affect our HTML. So I'm going to type in the word align. Align is the attribute name. Attributes always equal something. In the same way, like, we had these properties, and the properties always had a value. Well, attributes always equal something. So it's always equal sign, and then whatever it's equal to goes in quotation marks. Now, what it's equal to could be a name. It could be a number. It could be a whole sentence. It kind of depends on what the attribute is. So what this says is that there is there's a heading 2, or secondary heading, and that should be aligned to, and this is where I say where it should be aligned to, and I'm going to say center. Okay. Now once again, it has to, the value name here has to make sense to whatever your attribute name is. You don't have to put this into the closing tag, because when you close the tag, it closes any attributes that have been added to the tag. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to refresh, and you can see now it goes to the center of the page. If I wanted to go to the right side of the page, I could type in right, and it would do that. Alright, so hopefully that gives you kind of ideas. We're giving more information to the browser, and that's how we get different results than the standard results. Okay, so if you look at this, my text is defaultly black. I have a background color that's defaultly white. I want to change that. So actually, we can add a attribute to the body tag. If you think about it, the body tag actually represents the whole page, right? Because everything that's visible is in the body. So if you put a background color on the body, that's kind of the same as putting a background color on the entire web page. So what I can do is go to the body. I'm going to add an attribute called BG_color. BG_color for background color. It's an attribute. Attributes always equal something. What it equals to is whatever color I want it to be. So I'm going to make it blue. Type in blue. I'm going to save, refresh, and there you go. I got a blue background now. Maybe I'm going to change that and I'm going to make it green. So change the value to green. This is what I get. Okay. So that's pretty cool, right? So, okay, I like having this green background. Maybe I want to put a background on this heading too, or on this paragraph. So maybe I'm going to go to this paragraph and I'm going to type in BG_color equals yellow. I'm going to save, and I'm going to refresh. And unfortunately, nothing is going to happen. Okay, you notice that no matter how many times I save or refresh, it's not going to turn yellow. Okay. Is it because I wrote this incorrectly? And the answer is no, the syntax is correct. The problem is that not all attributes work on all tags. So in the same way, like number of doors, works for the car, but it doesn't work for the orange, or smell worked for the orange, but not for the car. It's like background color works for the body tag, but that attribute isn't recognized for just every tag. And it's not recognized for the p tag here. So this isn't going to work. And if it doesn't work, basically the browser is just going to kind of ignore it. So this isn't going to do what I want. So that kind of begs the question, like, okay, Mr. Hurwitz, how do I know what attributes I can use and which ones accept what? The answer is, as usual, when it comes to coding, you need like a reference. A good reference we can use there's going to be a link to this in the canvas. I'm going to use this particular one. This is called Tech on the Net. And as you kind of see over here, it kind of lists all of the tags. And inside, first of all, it says what it does, but it also actually gives a list of all the attributes that you can use for that particular tag. So you'll notice BG_color. BG_color is the attribute. What does it do? It sets a background color. So I'm going to look through some of these other ones. I like this one. This is text. What does text do? It's an attribute. It sets the foreground color of the text. In other words, my text is defaultly black. If I wanted it not to be black, that would be the text attribute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the body tag and let's add that new text attribute that we just talked about. Text. Attributes always equal something, and I'm going to make it set to the color of white. Now, HTML tags can accept multiple attributes. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't really matter which one comes first. It doesn't, BG_color could come first or text could come first. It doesn't change anything. As long as they're separated by a space. That's probably the most important part, is that there's a space separating the attributes and that the name of the tag always has to come first. So you can't start a tag with the attribute. The name of the tag has to come first. So I'm going to hit save. And now this works because the body tag does have a, a text color or a text attribute. So, you could go to any of the other tags we talked about, for instance, like the p tag, click, and it has one attribute called the align, which allows you to align text, kind of like what I did with the headings, or I don't know if the EM tag has anything. Not all tags will necessarily have attributes, some of them don't. So for instance, the EM tag doesn't have one. The list one does, actually. You could use lists to set the type. So for instance, if I went back to here, by default, if I have an unordered list, it's a bulleted list, like it looks like little bullets or little circles. You can actually stylize this differently using the attribute called type. Type equals, and the different values are circle, disk, or square, or none. So if I put in square, You can see these turn to squares. I can also do circles, which are basically open circles. Or if you want to use the default, which is the solid circles, that would be a disk. You can also technically set it to none, which means no bullet. Okay. All right, one last thing is that I said that, tags attributes are specific to the tags, meaning, BG color works on the body tag, it doesn't necessarily work on other tags, right? So I can't just take any attribute I want and apply it to any tag. That's not necessarily going to work. But there's a caveat to that. There's something called a global attribute. A global attribute is an attribute that can be applied to any HTML tag. Okay, so there's a couple of HTML attributes that it doesn't matter what tag it is, you will always be able to apply it. Okay, and so one of those tags, I'll list a couple of them. Some of those tags are class, ID, and style. We're not going to talk about these right now. These are going to come up more when we talk about cascading style sheets in about 1 or 2 or 3 modules. One that we can use right now, though, is called title. The title attribute is not the same thing as the title tag. The title tag, which is this, that's what sets the name of the page. What the title attribute does is it creates a little tooltip, so when you put your cursor above something, you're going to get a little pop-up message. So for instance, if I go into here, I can use the title attribute, and the value is whatever text I want to pop up. So I'm going to say, this is a tooltip example. Okay. I'm going to refresh, put my cursor here. And you can see when I put my cursor above this, I get the little tooltip. Now so this is the H2 tag, right? I'm going to go to another tag and apply the same title attribute. This is another tooltip. Because the title attribute is a global attribute, it applies to any tag. It doesn't matter if it's an H2, an H3, an H4, a P tag. Whatever I want to do, I can apply it. This is going to apply to the paragraph, so I put my cursor above the paragraph. So here's one, and then here's the second one, right? And let's go to the UL, or the unordered list. Same thing. I can use the title here too. It doesn't matter because title is a global attribute. It can apply to any tag. Anything that's a global attribute can apply to any HTML tag. Any HTML tag I've talked about, any HTML tag that they invent in the future, should all be able to accept this global attribute. This is yet another tooltip. I go back, let's refresh. Okay. So that's kind of the basics of attributes. Attributes are specific to tags typically, unless it's a global one. You put in, this is what it looks like in terms of its syntax, and it can modify the default information of a web page.